Hi, everyone. Dexter here. Welcome to Swarm with Us. This is an ongoing conversation with product builders and founders. Today, we're going to talk about building community and building product. I'm super excited to have two really good friends of mine from opposite sides of the world, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, Vlad Ciurca and Ron Baetiong. So Ron's based here in the Philippines with me, and Vlad is in Eastern Europe. So welcome, both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me tell everyone all the great things that you've done so I can ground everyone in the context of your experience. So Vlad is the co-founder of Techsylvania, which is an amazing tech conference in Eastern Europe. They get the best of the Valley, best of tech in the world to share their stories and really shine a light on all the progress that Eastern Europe's making in tech. He was prior to that, he was the VP of Business Development at Yopsio and product manager at Telenav, which focuses on navigation and in the auto manufacturing space. Also worked at UPS and Civil Logistics. So one of the really great things about Vlad is he's passionate about building community. He set up Startup Weekend. He was an organizer for that, and he also set up a space for managers in Romania. And in 2011, Vlad was also named Technology and Entrepreneurship Expert by the Young Romania Forum, which is just a huge honor. And Ron, I've known for almost, 10 years now?
Yep.
We both were a part of the Kickstart portfolio. I was at Calibre, I think you're at Guest List. Yep. He founded the largest podcast network in the Philippines that helps producers monetize their shows using technology. And Ron's, he's the pro at this. I am the apprentice of podcasts. His podcast, Hustleshare, I actually was a guest on, and he has captured the stories of CEOs and builders all throughout the Philippines, small startups to major conglomerates. He's heard them all. And he's what I call the keeper of the stories of the leaders of technology here in the Philippines. He created the first and biggest chatbot development agency in the Philippines. He sold that to Sterling Paper. I actually remember when he sold that. I kudos that on Facebook. And he started in the party scene and bridged from marketing and promoting parties to tech.
Yep.
I'm Dexter. I'm the CEO of Swarm, and Swarm is a global community of product builders and founders. So we connect product teams with projects globally. So enough about me and enough of the bragging. I'd love to jump in. Mm-hmm. You both have amazing stories, both building and navigating your own careers, but then also building the spaces around you to enable people like you to come up after you. And I'd really, I'd love to hear from you, Vlad. Like, what are you working on now? And kind of just share your story with how you got there. And yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to start with my journey in the tech sector, which began in 2012. And this was kind of a very random encounter. I met a German entrepreneur. His name is Philip Kandel, and I actually connected with him through Foursquare, which is now Swarm, the check-in app. And back then I was building this community for Romanian managers, and I met Philip, and we kind of bonded over that and about community building. And I was always kind of passionate about technology. Right about that time, I kind of discovered TechCrunch and was reading all the news and everything like that. And I was also passionate about building communities and doing events. And Philip was already running a technology startup. And we thought, what can we do in order to kind of kickstart the startup ecosystem in our city. The city is called Cluj. It's the second biggest city in Romania. It's been a huge European capital, and it's the unofficial capital of Transylvania. So we have that thing going for us, but it's also quite an important technology center. And historically, like Romania and Eastern Europe as a whole were probably more known for their outsourcing or kind of consulting type of services rather than product companies. And since there were a few like entrepreneurs such as Philip who were building their engineering teams here, we thought there's a good opportunity to kind of inspire more entrepreneurship in the region. And after doing a bunch of research, we settled on doing Startup Weekend, which was an international franchise. And that was kind of a good way to get more entrepreneurs or engineers that wanted to learn about entrepreneurship together. And we've done a few editions of those events, and we saw like more and more interest over the years. And actually from the first 2 editions, we had 3 teams that went through International Accelerator. So that was some sort of early validation. And we developed the concept up to a point. We actually hit the limits to how many people we hosted, and the guys from Startup Global said, hey, you should stop registrations. We kind of don't allow more than 200 attendees. It's normally 150. Okay, we get it. That and also correlated with the fact that I also started working in a product role at this German startup, kind of made me want to start a platform which can enable like let's say bringing more international founders, putting Eastern Europe more on the map, and basically I co-founded Techsylvania in 2014 with this exact goal of inspiring more entrepreneurship in the region and bringing knowledge, but also having the right type of like investors and founders who might want to engage with the local ecosystem afterwards.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I mean, just kind of going from a chance encounter on, a community app to
exactly
co-founding like the largest tech event in it's just what a kind of thin wedge to just like a massive impact that you've made. What's interesting is that like Ron and I come, based in Manila, and actually Ron, when I first moved to the Philippines, it was the outsourcing industry that was really driving a lot of the growth of the economy. It was like 2011, 2012, like, and that's I think around the time. Was that your first startup? Is that when you funded your first startup?
More or less, yes. But the quick story here, I'm not gonna take too much time because it might take the whole episode to go through the whole thing. I want to be respectful of the time. I was actually wanting to be an entrepreneur when I was in college. My startup idea was I wanted to get people to get into the guest list of all nightclubs. So Filipinos at that time, back pre-pandemic, there's this thing called partying, that you can go to clubs and all that. And that was my own personal problem that I wanted to solve. I created a website to get people into the club for those people that don't know promoters that would get them in for free. Because this is my problem before. I only have very limited money to come in, and I don't want to spend that trying to get cover charges to get in for free. So I said, I want to be one of the cool kids, but I don't know how to be a cool kid. So I long story short, I went from club to club, put it on the website as a listing where people can get into that list and get on the guest list. And I failed multiple times because I didn't have a co-founder, a solo founder. I thought hustle was going to be enough. I didn't know anything about product, how to build it. And I did all the mortal sins, like creating product that you didn't validate, not pivoting, drinking your own Kool-Aid and everything else in between. Took me forever. And after like 3 to 4 years, that's the first time I got funded, around 2013, actually. So 2011, I was struggling extremely because I was also I was a greenhorn. I was very raw. The startup ecosystem in the Philippines was very raw as well. Very, very few players. And a lot of those guys that are technically mentors were from the .com bubble. So it's old stuff, trying to sell ISPs and all that stuff. Right. And again, Filipinos are known for outsourcing as well. So that's a common denominator between us and Eastern Europe. and very, very few. It's a rare. It's like finding a needle in the haystack to get product advice. So the learning curve was long, and after that, that doing that for 6 years, eventually failed. So that was the most gut wrenching thing, because you put everything into it. But again, apparently, just like your investments, your mistakes can pile up and compound over time if you don't correct them. So had to eat a lot of humble pie. I got lucky in my second startup where after 12 months of putting it up, I got it acquired. And then now I'm on my third one, and I'm on a mission to help people not make the same mistakes that I did and unearth all these stories of amazing startup founders like you guys, to so that, especially in the Filipino setting, nobody actually talks about this as much as I have. That's why I created it, because I was craving for that type of content, but nobody was doing it. So it's like, you know what, maybe I have to step up so that we can pay it forward. So yeah, that's basically what I do. And now I have a podcast network to help podcasters as well do the same thing through whatever communities that they're giving a voice to.
That's amazing. My the hairs on the back of my neck stood up
Mm.
for one, because I'm inspired, but secondly because I've also made the same mistakes.
Yes.
And like both of you, as you both came from like not a product like development background per se, but you both pivoted into it. How did you, like, who was around you? Like, where did you go either for knowledge or support? I don't know, Vlad, was it Philip that coached you through that, or did you just self-study, or where did you go essentially to know how to make that transition?
Yeah, so I mean, working with Philip was my first job in tech, and I have to say I learned a lot. And I also went through an acquisition by Telenav. Scobler got acquired like 2 years into the journey, and I learned a lot from him, obviously, but also from my colleagues. And I also learned a lot from other conferences as well. And and Techsylvania was also a great reason to invite the type of folks I could also learn from. So there was a bunch of, let's say, factors that contributed to this learning process.
And Ron, for you, like, kind of how did you kind of, you kind of learned the hard way, as I did, like building, and then kind of like the build itself is the iteration.
Right.
And how, like you've already had a successful exit, and now with Athleisure, like for an entrepreneur who's kind of coming up in your space, what would you recommend to them for that, like how to learn how to build product and launch a company, right?
And I'll double down. This is not coming from me, but this is from a podcast that I recently listened to, from the Quest of Justin Kahn, right? And obviously, hindsight is always 2020. At first, you're obsessed as a first-time entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs are obsessed with building features, because we all think that features will solve the problem. The next best feature will, finally solve the problem that we're trying to do. And we pivot into creating feature after feature and feature, and fooling ourselves into creating features that we think is going to solve, again, that whole problem that we have, even if we do validate. But hindsight 2020 now, the first thing I always think of before even building product is, how do I distribute this? Because there's so many products out there that are less inferior, but are distributed properly to the proper channel organically without having a big customer acquisition cost, and leveraging word of mouth, whatever form that may be, and it sticks, right? Because you have an endless a funnel or a pipeline that will always bring in customers. Because at the end of the day, if there's not enough customers doing the product, that's using the product, you're at an always chasing tail. Now, after distribution, the next best thing is retention, right? Okay, it's not how much you get, it's how much you keep, right? And those are the things that, how do you keep people coming back? How do you make it sticky, and how do you minimize churn? That's how I think of product now, rather than in an endless pursuit of features, especially at customer acquisition, where overnight you lose probably 90% of your product, which was my mistake when I was doing the guest list app. I was acquiring them, but my customer funnel was it felt like a dating app where when people meet, when the objective of turning people into avid party animals, eventually they'll meet someone that will hook them up inside without using the app. So I'm always chasing tail, right? Now I'm after, again, retention and distribution.
That's phenomenal. And I think like I actually saw that tweet by Justin. First time founders think about product. Second time founders think about distribution. It
Yep.
made me really think. Okay, well, how do we enable our users to be the best advocates or ambassadors for, you know, the fact that we solved their problem, right?
Correct.
And whether if that's through viral channels or just with doing things like you both are doing, building communities around your product, could be a moat and a hedge around itself.
And can I just share one framework that I started listening? Because before, for the longest time, this is all self-taught, by the way. My journey in product is none of that stuff I can learn from here. So you're lucky, Vlad, because you got that from conferences. Here, we don't get that type of stuff in here. So Google was my best friend. YouTube was my best friend. And for the longest time, the framework that we were looking at was the Dave McClure's R metrics, the pirate metrics, right? And that works until I came across Reforge. They call them growth loops, right? That at the end of the day, customer acquisition is a cycle. And if you just find that loop that acquires customers and organically get more customers back, that's where you solve the retention and the acquisition and distribution problem as well.
Right. Is it the flywheel approach?
Yes, the flywheel approach, the loop.
Got it.
Yeah.
Say, oh man, like because I was rooted like 500 startups. David McClure used to come out here to the Philippines for Geeks on the Beach, and the pirate metrics is what drove a lot of our kind of product planning. But so we're also like learning and evolving with the kind of frameworks that we use to be able to just make the second kind of go around easier. Vlad, I don't know if you're how are you looking to kind of jump into entrepreneurship? Like what are some of the things that you're interested in either learning or doing? Because you've helped build an ecosystem. I would imagine that you might want to, and you've also worked and exited a company. My goodness. Like what are some of your thoughts in terms of building your own kind of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, Techsylvania itself has been a real journey, I have to say. For the first 3 years, it was kind of bootstrapped. I was doing it on the side. It was my second full-time job after the day one. So it was the night shift, and I really learned a lot. It's my first business, and we eventually decided to raise a little bit of funding to grow the team so we can start doing this full time. And we've already been in this journey for close to 8 years now. And this has been like a tremendous learning experience, and I hope that it's given me already a bunch of lessons for what not to do in the next kind of company. But yeah, so far I'm still kind of looking a bit at a few spaces. I'm particularly interested in fintech, in software as a service, in productivity tools, but haven't quite gotten to that kind of idea I'm really passionate about building. I've also done a program which I understood you're also looking at. It's called On Deck. They call it like Stanford for the web, or for the internet era, and that's a really
I went
good
to Stanford.
community.
I went to Stanford's competitor.
Oh.
So I don't know if
Okay.
that's an analogy for me.
Okay. Okay.
I was rejected by Stanford. Maybe this get in. But yeah, like the Stanford.
You open a can of worms, Vlad. Right there.
But like how, I mean, thinking through, maybe Ron, like how did you come up with your second or third idea? Because like I know that Vlad, you're thinking about which problem that you want to solve and what you want to bring to market. But like how did you come up with either guest list? Well, you talked about guest list, but what was that process like?
So for some reason, I always end up building company for something that I'm always passionate about. I can't build something that I don't care for, right? So guest list, obviously, when you're young 20 something, partying was life. So eventually, but that's a phase. Eventually, you grow old, and like there was a good stretch over the last 2 to 3 years. Like, God damn, I'm done. I'm done with this. It's just like I don't even want to stay up 12 midnight. Like, dude, why am I still up? I'm done. Right? You eventually fall out of it. But yeah, again, it's that passion that keeps you going. The second one was actually the chatbot thing was totally opportunistic, and it's completely stitched to guest list because we were living our last few days of guest list. I was still in salvage mode. I was trying to salvage it to do one last pivot, right? And then I realized that one thing that all of my users don't want to use an app to get into a club. Their normal behavior to get into a guest list of a club is they're going to send you a bunch of names, right? And then Mark Zuckerberg announces in 2016 that chatbots are a thing now. It's like, wow. If you just announced this 6 months before, I would have totally pivoted and it would have been a perfect platform. But we only had few more weeks of runway and it was in too deep. But my knee jerk was, hey, maybe I should buy that domain. Chatbot.ph. I didn't know anything about bots. I didn't know anything about AI. And I bought it to help guest list pivot. But then I realized, you know what? There's so many more people that I can help automate for by doing B2B instead of doing B2B2C marketplace style. And again, I probably the writing was on the wall. So instead of trying to salvage something that's irreparable, I'll just take advantage of it. And one thing about guest list is it also allowed me to do one thing that I love, which is selling. So now selling, I wasn't selling to users, I was selling to businessmen. So that effort that I put in garnered bigger checks without having to convert users. And inevitably, eventually, again, as hustle comes in, you're more experienced. I applied everything that I learned from all the mistakes that I did in Yes List. And then, yeah, it eventually came in. And then after the acquisition, my whole mode was when my mentor told me when I was literally starting out with Yes List was I need whenever I become successful or I'm in a position to be successful, I should pay it forward, not paying back. Hence the podcast. I said, man, I love talking and I have conversations like this with Dexter every single time when I go to his office. And how come nobody's documenting this? And it wouldn't take up too much of my time. Yes, it would actually pay some bills. Of course, I'm going to be totally opportunistic for it. And then I created a podcast. Lo and behold, after 6 months, I realized, hey, you know what? I love this thing. And I think I've found my calling. But why stop at just the startup ecosystem and putting their stories forward? And why not help more podcasters do what I was doing and do it at scale? And at that time, the only difference was the ambition. Before, I was thinking like a local founder. I was always solving problems within my backyard. And that's the biggest knock for a lot of Filipino entrepreneurs. They build product only for Filipino problems, where in reality, a lot of the problems that we actually solve are similar in nature. And I said, why the hell not do it like the Caliber guys? Do it in Indo, do it in wherever, because apparently it applies. And this year, again, just following the footsteps of the Caliber guys, aka Dexter and Paul, was able to do is that, hey, this local dude, born and raised here, educated here, can actually get it done. So it's that. And again, the objective now is to inspire more people. That if a local dude like me, who went through a rough path, can get it done, everybody else can too.
I didn't realize that Chatbot was rooted kind of in a precipice story where you kind of pulled it back from the abyss and turned it into something like into an exit that I remember like the article that came out when you sold Chatbot and you bought your mom a house. I was like, I cried when I saw that. It's amazing. It's like
That's
you
amazing.
turn it around, you know? Like Vlad, it's really interesting because Ron said that Filipinos build for local problems, even though their focus is very local. In your experience, I mean, you've probably seen the broadest swath of Eastern European tech entrepreneurs. What is that similar? Is it very different? Because you're connected to Europe in different ways, and even the Western Europe and even the US. So I'm kind of curious, like, what's the mindset for founders? Like, who are they building for, and what is their kind of like ambition profile?
Yeah, so even when we were hosting Startup Weekend, like close to 10 years ago, we saw a lot of ideas that were basically clones of things that we saw, like in, I don't know, in Germany, in the UK or US. And there's still a bunch of startups which even get funded that are kind of clones of other businesses from abroad. But I think right now, let's say the playing field is more balanced. There's also companies which are built with like a global mindset, and we have a bunch of success stories right now. Like UiPath was pretty much a company that was doing outsourcing for 10 years from 2005 to 2015, and they've built like a product internally, and they struggled raising, and then in 2015 they got their first funding round from a bunch of European investors, and then it was like a story where they grew like crazy, and they eventually listed on the Nasdaq like last year. So there's a few of those success stories, not that many, but it's definitely something that's changing as people see like more stories like that. That's a good source of inspiration. And Ron, I actually wanted to go back to your idea about being passionate about what you're building, and you kind of hinted that like the second startup was a bit more opportunistic. There's also that saying that passion comes with like success or like traction, and I'm curious what you both think about this, that you don't necessarily need to be like super passionate about something, but once you, I don't know, you see a great opportunity and you start building upon that, and you get some traction or early success, you start to actually become more driven or passionate about that thing.
That's true. Again, I didn't know anything about AI. What did I was a party guy. So parties to AI and messing conversational things. So it's a completely thing, but that's absolutely true. Because as entrepreneurs, of course, you wanna be opportunistic about it, but there's still some hint of passion. The passion that I was able to unlock was I loved selling. Because prior to me doing guest list, my job was Groupon. I was in Groupon. I was the one going on the field, selling to creating all these deals for the site that we were putting on, the deals. And I love that life. And it's like a throwback to that kind of life. The only difference is I'm now selling something that I'm creating. I'm not given a quota of a sales supervisor, right? So it's something going back, but it's absolutely correct, because you learn to fall in love and learn to be passionate about something that you're getting good at. But there was already hints of passion prior to this, because again, you'll always hit a wall. And when you hit that wall, that's where you dig deep. And if you don't have deep pockets of passion, even if you're good at it, you're going to be in trouble. So that's where it comes handy.
That's a great point.
I've gone through a couple of those moments at Caliber, my prior company, where it's kind of like, it's the runway problem. A lot of the startups,
Yes.
Ron and my generation, that were founded when Guest List and Caliber were founded, they all faced that end of the runway, because the ecosystem at that time there was a funding gap between like seed and like even Series A.
Yep.
And we had to make some really tough decisions to try to salvage the business and to try to kind of push us through. It probably would have been easier and reasonable to kind of just start over and start a new business. But yeah, I think like like my story with Caliber is that it was a bit opportunistic myself. Like I never actually, my background was I was in workforce, right? Yeah. But the Philippines was really changing. There weren't really any platforms that matched people with jobs that did it very well. So we're like, okay, this is probably an opportunity for us to apply what we know and solve it with technology. like Ron, I didn't have a tech background, but we built that team around us. So I think the passion, maybe it's most important when you face kind of the edge.
Yes.
the part
Yeah.
of which
When
you're
you're staring death in the face. The Grim Reaper, I'm like, okay, wait, let me get my shield of passion or a parachute of passion to make this through this level.
and just to kind of look at like some of the team members along the way, there's some really great talent who made amazing contributions, but ultimately they weren't just kind of passionate about the end problem. So it was, that they when they knew that we were in a stable place, they went off and did amazing things. So I guess it kind of just kind of comes down to where you are in your journey and who your partners are. Because I think that it's I think that if I wasn't passionate either about the people or the problem that we were solving, like it would have been very easy to kind of walk away. But one of the things that I'm curious about is like in Eastern Europe, where are the nodes like of like startup ecosystems? Like, is it clustered around Cluj, or are there specific kind of cities that actually have that density?
Yeah, so I would say Europe is kind of there's a bunch of like small ecosystems, and like one of the things that I still think it's kind of missing a bit, but it's very slowly changing, is like the collaboration between various ecosystems, and Romania obviously has like a few of these nodes, like Bucharest, the capital, Cluj, then Iași, which is the kind of the third biggest node in terms of talent. Then we have like Sofia in Bulgaria or Budapest in Hungary, and there's obviously like Ukraine, which has a bunch of talented engineers as well. And like kind of each of these countries had or has some of their own success stories when it comes to products, like Prezi in Hungary, or Telerik in Bulgaria, which was quite a significant exit, and Romania with UiPath and Bitdefender, and there's a few other similar examples in each country.
Got it. Interesting. Are they fairly segregated, or you mentioned earlier there's not as much collaboration, but is there this notion that this is a market, or is it fairly, Bulgaria is Bulgaria, Hungary is Hungary, Ukraine's Ukraine, Romania is Romania?
The second one. I mean, it's quite the market as a whole is either being viewed as, I don't know, if we're talking about customers, a bunch of companies are chasing either like Germany or UK or these bigger Western European countries. But when it comes to talent, yeah, it's kind of each ecosystem on its own.
Okay, interesting. So you're kind of like building companies and solutions for markets that you aren't necessarily from, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Ron, what do you think? Because like you're expanding now into Indonesia. What's the kind of mindset in Southeast Asia? Like, are we building for the Philippine market? Are we looking to build for another market? How would you compare that?
It varies from the type of founder leading the startup. Because if I'm just gonna define the local Filipino type of founders, I would classify them into three buckets. Okay, so the first one is the expat market. These are, the foreigners that would come in. They have a fresh set of eyes that come in and they realize they're good typically in the macros. They understand the data that the GDP is here. This is where the gap is there, where they can attack and they can greatly execute, right? And majority of them are able to raise significant funding from the get-go, even at an idea phase. The second bucket are the repatriates, such as you, Dexter. Filipino by blood, exposed to a foreign thing. So the special thing about repatriates is you have the Filipino nuances that you understand, and you're ambitious too, and you're not just building for, again, the backyard problems that you see it, because you've seen success in other forms of it in other countries, right? So you have a bigger perspective, but you're a hybrid because you understand the nuances of how a Filipino tries to tackle it. Because the unique thing about the Philippines is we're like a hermit in our own region. We're the most westernized country in terms of behavior, in terms of appetite, in terms of content, and in terms of how we even talk. Our last names sound Mexican, right? But we're Asians, right? You know, it's that. And if you compare it, and this is where the brain drain kind of happened, because Filipinos don't understand that we have a lot of similarities with our neighbors. And now I'm understanding that because I'm going through Indonesia. It's like, man, we have so many similarities with these guys. How come I didn't know about this? I'm just discovering as I'm going through this, because the third bucket is where I'm from. This is the local dude, didn't see much overseas, wasn't exposed with a lot of stuff, and the the scary part of that is typically they either, number one, go to the default, which is I'll sell my time, I'll do outsourcing. There's nothing wrong with that, but with the same skill set, you can actually build your own product pretty well. Or number two, you end up just solving a very, very niche problem that nobody wants to fund because the upside is very raw. It doesn't, again, they don't have the perspective of, oh, I can actually get this done in Indo. I can do it in Vietnam. I can do it in Thailand. But because, again, you're only just like, tunnel vision, which is that small thing, it's hard to do it. You eventually build, and I credit Paul, Dexter's co-founder and Caliber. You end up building a lifestyle business. It's good, it can be profitable, but it won't scale because you have a very localized thing. And again, the downside is there's a lot of talent. So there are decent devs here actually, but you'll probably see them in Upwork selling their time, which is nothing wrong with it, by the way. But what if just a small portion of that talent started acting like a repatriate because they were exposed to bigger things? I think there will be bigger and better companies coming out of this thing. And it's starting to happen. Over the last few years, there's a lot more repatriates that are coming in, like, the Paymongos of the world was exposed with people who studied overseas, the Kumus of the world here, again, Filipinos that had stayed in the US a little bit, and a lot are those. And now we're getting a lot of funding, bigger check sizes, millions of dollars at seed investment. That's unheard of 3, 4, 5 years ago. And even Filipinos doing crypto, which is, again, apparently Philippines is a good haven because we have a central bank that's very accepting of crypto companies. And we have a Filipino unicorn that raised $12.5 million in 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. How did they do that?
Not. Exactly. And just a couple of days ago, they got invested on by A16Z.
Yeah.
Wow. What's the name of this company?
White.
Yield Games, YGG.
Yeah. They actually they shared an office with us for a little bit with Caliber. So, but yeah, it's like the founder founded another gaming company, and they're able to really connect it with crypto, and it's probably one of the most profitable tokens in the world right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but nobody's. I mean, it's a very niche story. It's just these stories are just happening now, right?
Right, because there's a lot of out of that local pool, the ones that are doing well now are not first-time entrepreneurs. I'm on my third one, but it took me 10 years to even get into position to be in here, right? But I care for the ones who are just starting out, the greenhorns, and hopefully they don't have to take this much time to get where we are now.
It's interesting you say that because, like, I was talking to someone who co-founded YEGG, and this person was working for a company that it was a larger company. This person had a really awesome support and a really interesting body of work, But this person's like, oh, I really, I might be getting paid a lot. They might be giving me a lot of responsibility, but I really want to bring something new to the market. And YGG was born, that part of that. I don't know if that story is public, so I'm very vague with the pronouns.
It is now. It will be in Hustleshare as well. It is public.
Okay.
And the other thing too is that I noticed, because the type of ideas that the locals, because of lack of exposure to overseas, majority of them are just clones of whatever that's already in the red ocean.
That's
Most
something that I
people-
see here.
Yeah,
Really?
most of the time, the ones that really plow through or that really have a good thing are those ones that identify a blue ocean, become a very fast first mover, and are contrarian at best. I mean, at worst, meaning they're going against the grain, doing something that's never been done before, at least in the local or a regional scale.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like Vlad, like I think that it's very interesting because you have exposure not just Eastern Europe, but you spent some time in the Valley. You have exposure kind of like through the networks that you've been a part of, like with On Deck, working with like Philip. Like Ron kind of really articulated, there's raw talent, but it's not channeled towards entrepreneurship or blue ocean opportunities. It's channeled towards making money as a services provider, not as a problem solver or as a commercial. Like, what's your experience there?
Exactly. And Ron pointed out kind of obvious kind of challenge with this, the fact that people are not exposed to like other markets, or they don't really know like what are the big challenges that need solving. And yeah, I mean, of course, if you only stay and work in like a very niche industry or do only services or outsourcing, it's very tough to kind of discover what are the real challenges. And yeah, you can only do this by trying to interact with as many people, and even like as you pointed out, I did have like quite a good experience with like various ecosystems and by traveling a lot, but even I don't think I have like the answer to what's a really great challenge I can start working on, and it's applicable globally, not just to our local market. So yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people have here as well.
That's interesting. So, and it puts into context kind of the importance of Techsylvania, right? Because you are bringing that exposure into the local scene. What are some, have you seen, how are people reacting to it? Is it slowly moving the needle in terms of wanting to take this entrepreneurial risk for folks who might be like really great developers or product managers, but they're working in the outsourcing space? Like, how has that kind of transformation come along as you've been building, the space with Techsylvania?
I would say it's moving the needle, probably a bit slower than what how we would like, and that is related to the fact that like developers here have like a really great lifestyle. I mean, like the salaries are great, cost of living is low, and I mean, even when talking to engineer friends of mine, and I asked them, hey, if you were to receive like a great offer from one of the big tech companies in the Valley, would you move? And most of them say no, because like the cost of living in the US is higher. At the end of the day, they make less money than they would here, just because of like rent and everything else that's really much more expensive there. And yeah, that kind of is one of the challenges. And also one of the other things that I see, there's a few like VC funds here, but not enough really early stage capital. And when I referring to early stage capital, I'm thinking like checks between 50 to 200, 250K. There's some crowdfunding platforms which are starting to get traction, and they're covering a bit of this kind of gap. But also besides capital, I think one of the really key factors is like getting somebody who has experience, maybe some connections. So you get also like the value add investor besides the actual capital.
Are the VCs that are kind of paying attention to Eastern Europe now, are they homegrown with like LPs that are from Eastern Europe, or are they, European VCs or VCs from the US that are taking an interest in your part of the world?
Yeah, so the local VCs have a mix of like LPs that are local, and also money from the European Investment Fund, which is a major LP in a ton of the European VCs. And yeah, right now, I mean, we got really good success with bringing partners from top tier funds, both from Europe and the US. They come here, and more recently, a bunch of them are asking us, hey, who's the next UiPath? I'd love to invest in them. And we always tell them, hey, if we would have known, we would have already invested in that company. So you should just come and discover that company for yourselves. But there's definitely interest from abroad. And one of the other aspects that we see, coming back to your previous question, is the fact that just because we have all of these great investors, it's more interesting for international startups. We have startup competition, which in the first few years we offered the prize like a 10-day trip to Silicon Valley, where we facilitated meetings and everything else. But then in the past 3 years, we switched to a model where we're syndicating on investments, and it was anywhere between 100 and 150K. And if originally we had, let's say, 40% of the startups that were applying were from Romania and the rest from abroad, now it's like 80% from abroad and 20% from Romania. So there's more and more interest from companies from abroad.
When you say we, like we are attracting some of the top tier VCs, and we're kind of attracting, who's the we? Is it the government? Is it Techsylvania? Is it kind of a mafia that you're a part of? That
I mean, Techsylvania is me and my co-founder, who's also my wife, and Philip.
That's the real boss right there.
Exactly. She's the boss always, so can't argue with that. And Philip supported us from like even when we had the idea, so he's been a great mentor to us, and so eventually investor, and he's the moderator for Techsylvania. But there's a bunch of like of the startup competition we host together with a team who's built an accelerator previously, and they're running a small pre-seed fund. So that's joint partnership, and then we have various stakeholders involved in most of the things that we do.
Well, that's amazing. So it's like your crew that's the epicenter for like attracting the capital and doing the convening. It makes sense because you are the convener, right? So that's just amazing. It's an amazing position to be.
And this was something we've done like very deliberately from day one, because one of the other inspirations for Techsylvania was the fact that there were some conferences like business and tech oriented, but I saw the same folks over and over again. And when we started Techsylvania, we said we would bring like 90% like international, like tech executives, founders, and investors, and invite only like the top Romanian like founders or experts. And then we would always kind of change the lineup from one year to another, because people want to see like new speakers, new faces, and that keeps things always much more interesting. And yeah, I think this made a huge difference.
Yeah, it's amazing. Ron, so like who do you think that is, who's playing that role for the Philippines, that convener, that attraction role? Because we're looking at it for Eastern Europe, but who is that for the Philippines?
I don't think it's just one person, but it's a bunch of guys. So we do have, what we don't have the ability now is, again, just going around. So where all that action happens is on Startup PH. There's a group of around 30,000 to 40,000 people now. That's where people typically congregate. And the ones that really are actively, at least going out there, is that really incubates all these ideas and whatnot is QBO. These are the ones that are really going as grassroots as possible, telling them what a startup is, how to validate an idea, the building blocks. And I help them out as a mentor because I come from that sector, and I don't want to be the last. And they are the ones who are probably going to be capable because they understand the problem locally as better than anyone. What they lack is the perspective of a foreign founder. So you got to find that balance, right? Because eventually they do that. Now the movers is Kubo in terms of incubating. There's a couple of guys like Paul Pajo who's just been every week on Clubhouse talking about startups and whatnot. And maybe I am, but I'm really just doing this not to, again, I'm just trying to pay it forward. At the end of the day, if you ask me to define what I do is I'll always be a founder, right? I'll always wear the founder hat. My only job is that when I do have an opportunity to talk to other founders because I empathize with them, it's just to record those conversations and immortalize them in the web so that some other founders that are, again, going through that where we were 5-10 years ago don't have to make the same mistake.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I don't know if either of you know this, but my background is actually in politics. I help candidates run for office in the US. And there's this model for grassroots organizing or strategy, which is what we call grassroots and grass tops. Grassroots is you start at the most local level of those who are furthest away from the seat of power. And the grass tops is you're working actually with the decision makers, with the influencers over the decision makers. It's kind of an insider strategy. What's interesting is that like a lot of what's happening in the Philippines, it's grassroots going up, reaching up to the grass tops. Yep. And I don't know if this is fair to say, Vlad, but you kind of reaching out and convening external forces, the investors, the VCs, the CEOs, titans of industry. It's kind of a grass top strategy where you're kind of bringing in the external exposure from the top and kind of letting that kind of trickle down into your grassroots. And I'm curious, like, they're both, I think we're only starting to see it pay dividends in the Philippines because it's a lot of those grassroots founders that are now kind of getting into Y Combinator, like Ron, that are going into Indonesia. And they're actually starting to open doors for each other now. Like Ron hyped me up to a seed stage investor. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, cause they were super excited to talk to me, right? So, and made my job of pitching them just that much easier. And Ron did it because we come from the same place. We started our previous companies around the same time. And I'm seeing it like now that a lot of companies are getting into Y Combinator, they're introducing each other to their seed investors, they're opening doors, helping each other figure out like with their stacks, helping recruit, so on and so forth. Well, not recruit because it's really competitive, but for everything else, they're super helpful.
And there's one thing that I'd like to add. I forgot who told me. I think it's the guys from Idea Space, one of the incubators here, that thriving ecosystems around the world are always founder led. It won't come from anybody else. Yes, there will be support from government, there will be support from financial institutions, but in order for it to thrive, it needs to be founders helping other founders as well.
Agreed.
So, I think like I'm really excited to continue this conversation. I know that this will not be the last time. I'm hoping to come out to Romania and Ron.
Of course, you and Ron are both invited.
Yes, I need me some good European food, my man. We've been stuck in here,
and
so
we have the vampires here as well. Don't forget about them.
It's all good.
No one made those jokes.
Yeah. We'll bring our aswang. That's a local folklore that we're going to be bringing over.
Yeah, great.
Amazing. Maybe Vlad, tell us a little bit about Techsylvania and like your lineup this year is just amazing.
So one of the best speakers is the gentleman called Dexter Liggett Gordon. Very excited about your talk actually, so that the people can get more exposure about your ecosystem and your journey of being the first Filipino startup going through YC. I think that's super interesting. But Techsylvania takes place virtually between September 22nd, 23rd. We're expecting around 5,000 attendees, and we have some great speakers confirmed, like you mentioned, the CEO of Stack Overflow, CEO of Lime. We just confirmed the founder of Shutterstock and a bunch of like other great like executives big companies or investors as well. And we're doing the startup competition, which will have an investment prize, which we're syndicating again, and then there's a stage with technical workshops that we're doing, and a bunch of other things. So all in all, there's like 8 or 9 activities. So you won't get bored. We are using the Hopin platform, so you'll have a bunch of like tabs to scroll through if you don't like a specific section. But yeah, this is what we're planning this year.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we're actually, Techsylvania, we're giving away a ticket to come out. So if
Wow.
those of you who are in Swarm, please ask a question and we'll tag you and enter you into the raffle. Thank you so much, Techsylvania and Vlad, for doing that.
Pleasure.
And it's an amazing opportunity. Like Mark, you had Mark Cuban at, like, was it 2 years ago or last
year? We had Mark Cuban.
Wow.
Mark Cuban actually has Romanian Jewish origins, and if I have a few seconds, this is a story I really want to share. And I've been trying to get him with this hanger for like 5 years, and 5 years in a row, I emailed him and no response for like 5 years. And in the 5th year, I got a response saying, "You're always doing Techsylvania when we're shooting Shark Tank." I was like, damn, what can we do? And then I waited a few more months, then COVID happened, and I said, hey, we moved the event actually from June, when you're having Shark Tank, to September, and it's virtual. There's no reason for you not to be able to make it. And I said, we're doing Shark Tank again then. And I said, oh, that's impossible. And I said, hey, look, Mark, we were also having like a fantastic moderator, Kara Swisher, who in my opinion is like the best tech and business journalist worldwide.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, hosting that
Wow.
session. And I said, all the content is live, but for you, we're gonna make an exception and pre-record it. And he agreed. So that was something that was like 5 years in the making. And Tony Fadell who was a similar story. I tried to get him for like 4 years, and we eventually got him last year. Kara also moderated that session with him, so that helped.
Yeah, it's sooner than later, people are gonna have to wait 5 years to get you to speak at their conferences.
There you go. We will. All right. Just don't bring Dracula wherever you're gonna go though. That's gonna be scary. There you go.
So Techsylvania this September. Check it out at techsylvania.com. Ron, you have both like a lot of things going on. Hustleshare, you're on Spotify. Are you also on like the Apple podcast?
All the major podcast apps. Again, I only care about 2 things: startups and podcasts. That's my life. Right. So if you do want to listen to the startup life, which is still in a form of podcast, it's going to be the Hustleshare podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. But I basically document the plight of Filipino founders in the ecosystem. And, we have almost 3 years worth of content in there, hundreds and hundreds of startup founders that we feature every week since February 2019. And then, of course, we do have the biggest podcast network in Southeast Asia with over 200 podcasts now. So we're starting that whole wave here. And again, putting the Filipino flag, waving it wherever we end up. But this is done by Southeast Asians for Southeast Asians.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll put the links to both Techsylvania, Podcast Asia, and Hustleshare in the description below. And if you want to join Swarm, please check us out at swarm.work. Again, we're a community of builders and founders. We have these kinds of conversations on our platform, and we also connect folks with projects. So that's our aim. So Ron, Vlad, it was a supreme pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to having this conversation at Techsylvania and beyond.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome.